Azure.
My name is Andrew, and I'm here today to talk to you about art programs, specifically Andrea's claim that fine arts programs are vital for education. My opponent's secondary claims were, number one, arts programs directly benefit students' academic achievement. Number two, the arts benefit social and emotional development. My response to the first claim is that the importance of art programs to primary education is not well supported by the advocate. For the most part, the sources my advocate uses refer to how art helps children develop. For example, how the Arts Center enhanced children's development. Creative art helps children develop across many domains, and no child left behind in our education policy. While this research is applicable to how art affects young children, it fails to support the broader claim that fine arts programs are vital for education in general. The research is not applied to secondary and post-secondary education, such as high school and college. My second point is that the New York Times article presented by the advocate as evidence failed to effectively support the advocate's claim. The article, "The Arts May Aid in Literacy" study says, after analyzing this article, I found problematic points that diminish the credibility of it as used for evidence. There was bias in the research methods presented in the article but not mentioned by the advocate. Quote, "We personally chose to have the students talk to us instead of writing because we thought that they would show language skills, not purely reading and writing skills. While it's great that they can talk well, it doesn't make sense to use the term literacy when you exclude writing exercises in the study." Additionally, the study sample size consisted of participants from within the institution's schools only. From the actual study itself, the study was designed to examine the impact of Guggenheim's pioneering program Learning Through the Art on students' ability to describe and interpret art and to apply these skills to understanding written text. In general, this study did not applied itself very well to this specific art program, but was not very applicable to the broader topic of how art programs in general benefit academic achievement. My opponent's second claim, the arts benefit social and emotional development. My first response to this is that the advocate's second secondary claim does not support the assertion that art programs are vital to education. By using the term vital, my advocate's warrant suggests that without art, students would not be able to properly develop socially and emotionally. But this is not the case. Sports is a good example of a way to allow yourself to have the same benefits without participating in art programs. According to Sports and Development, the institution that uses sports to help development in youths, the role of sports in inclusion has shown to be strongly linked to building social cohesion and social capital among young people and adults and communities. In general, playing sports is a valid alternative to art programs as a means of developing socially and emotionally. Another category which provides the same benefits is video and board games. According to an article published in 2013 in the journal American Psychologist, both traditional video games are fundamentally voluntary in nature. They can include competitive and cooperative objectives. Players immerse themselves in pretend worlds that are safe contexts in which negative emotions can be worked out. And games allow a sense of control with just enough unpredictability to feel deep satisfaction and intense pride when formidable goals are finally reached. The benefits addressed by this study are the same points my advocate uses to support why art programs are necessary. For example, children gain self-confidence, feel pride, they experience success. Another benefit of video games is that playing games as a character from a different social or ethnic background can help players develop empathy towards these social groups. In 2013, a study published in the journal Consciousness and Cognition found that in this paper, we have pointed to a further consequence of body semantics beyond a behavioral effect to a far more complex one involving a deep-seated issues such as racial bias, with results suggesting the embodiment of light-skinned people in a dark-skinned body can lead to a comparative reduction in their implicit racial bias. To summarize that, forcing players to make decisions in a narrative situation as somebody that's very different from themselves gives them a better understanding of what life is like for others, for people who are very different than them, such as reducing racial bias. Overall, the sports and video games are good examples of things that could benefit you in the same way art would, are not quite vital, as the advocate suggested. In conclusion, while the advocate's evidence supported the need for art programs in early education programs, it did not address the broader topic of their necessity in higher education. Art is not vital to education because there are plenty of other activities which provide the same benefits. Thank you.
We're good on all the structural stuff. You did a pretty good job signposting at the beginning. On the first point, you have an interesting challenge here on the evidence suggesting that children and their development is not necessarily the same as exists in the rest of their academic lives. And you draw a distinction between secondary and post-secondary schools, which I think is a reasonable claim to make. However, then you don't provide any evidence to show that there is a difference between secondary and post-secondary, or that kids learn more or less in one place or the other. The advocate's default position could simply be that those things that kids learn when they are younger has the default advantage to them later on, and it doesn't matter if they don't get it in the secondary or post-secondary schools, because if they got it early enough, they'll already have the advantage. I'm not sure that I appreciate the idea that you have here. I just think it needs to be provided with some additional evidence. The challenge on the evidence at the advocate side I thought was pretty good, where you suggested that there was potential bias in the research methodology, and you asked a very legitimate question about literacy. I thought that was an interesting response to make on that situation. So I would I would accept that is a valid point. The question that I do have is whether or not the student population that was used in the study was so unique that you couldn't reach a particular conclusion. That seemed to be an inference that you were making, and you don't really give us a reason to believe that it is substantially distinctive. And maybe it's just the title of the organization that was being researched that gives you that inference. I think you need a little bit more argument on that. On the second point, basically, you're arguing that the fine arts are not unique in providing these kinds of advantages, which minimizes them. It doesn't deny that they might provide those advantages, but your argument here is that they can get those advantages from several other activities, sports and video gaming and those kinds of things. And I thought that worked pretty well. The idea of maybe even an extra advantage coming from playing video games where people are not characters of the same ethnic background. I thought that was an interesting little add-on, although I'm not sure that it shows that it's automatically better than fine arts. It does show that there is some supplemental material that goes along with these other options that might be comparably advantageous. There's not really a lot of discussion of what the advocate's evidence on this point is, except that it's generic in nature. I think your delivery is maybe a little bit dry. That's partially because you're reading and trying to be so careful with the language that you created. You won't have the opportunity to be quite as deliberate in the debates. You'll have to be a little bit more spontaneous. So maybe some more forceful declarative statements and a little bit less parsing of the language. All right. Thank you.